Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Sept's Digital Housing Series 2022 in association with Enterprise Ireland. My name is Alan Hoare from TU Dublin and the Construction IT Alliance. This is part of the Challenge, Change, Learn initiative that Sept have been taking within their current strategy. So we know about the challenge of housing. We know about the change that a more industrialized future will bring, and off-site manufacturing has a place and a role to play in addressing the pipeline of a housing shortage. And of course, learning from speakers like we have this morning. So the topic, or this afternoon, the topic we're looking at is establishing the skills to embrace modern methods of construction and digitalization across the residential supply chain. So Suzanne, if you want to go to the second slide there. Suzanne? Yes, so those of you who don't know the Alliance, we're a not-for-profit organization and we run these events on a monthly basis. We have a number of initiatives. Today it's the Digital Housing Series. We're also involved in a national Build Digital project. We have a Tech Trend series later this month. We're running a series of events on that. We have a regional event series, and we have our signature events each year, like Sept Tech Live. And this event is also kindly funded and sponsored with the support of Sept SkillNet, our training network. So Suzanne, to the next slide, please. So delighted to welcome our speakers here this afternoon. We've got Mark Southgate from Moby, Claire Lane from the LMC Group, and Liz Carroll from Construction Professional SkillNet. So, as I say, we'll be looking at this challenge of addressing the skills, of the new skills that are needed for modern methods and how digitalization can play a role. I'd also like to kindly thank our sponsors, Diatech, Dimitri, and for their continued support. So I'm going to hand you over now to Mark, our first speaker this afternoon. Mark, good afternoon.
Afternoon, Alan. I will just get my slides up for a second.
So each of the speakers will give a little introduction to themselves rather than me having to go through the bio, if that's okay.
Thanks,
so
Alan.
Over to you, Mark. I'm going to go on mute now. Thank you.
Thank you. You covered where I was getting my slides up. That's great. Thank you. Okay, so my name's Mark Southgate. I am grandly titled Chief Executive of Moby. Moby is the Ministry of Building, Innovation and Education. We're not a government ministry. We're a charity. And in fact, I'll go to our next slide. We're set up by this man, George Clark, the architect and TV presenter. And the charity is focused on two things: trying to improve the quality of house building in the UK and trying to get young people into the built environment and obviously into home building and construction in particular. So that's our focus. And Alan's asked me to do a little intro about Moby, a little bit of the UK context, and then something about what we're doing in the UK to try and address those, what I call modern construction skills. And by that, I mean digital, sustainable construction and modern methods and manufacturing approaches. So started Moby, as I said, to inspire a young generation to come in and shake the industry up. It needs a lot of shaking up, and I'll come to that in a second. So we've done that and sort of change the home environment and bring young people in to an industry which sometimes isn't as attractive as it could be. So what's the context in the UK? One is that we are way short the amount of houses we need. The previous Prime Minister and before him had set a target of 300,000 houses per annum by the middle of this decade. And as you can see by this graph, we are pretty short. Okay, it only goes up to 2018, but nevertheless, the best we've done in recent years is 230,000, so 70,000 short, and often more than that. So the need to build more houses, so that's one of our housing problems. But we've also got a problem around the quality of what we build as well. And that's both in terms of design, in terms of placemaking, in terms of traffic, sustainability, a whole bunch of aspects where, quite frankly, our house building isn't up to where it should be. It's not as low carbon as it should be. It should be zero carbon. It isn't. It's not as good for the customer as it should be. So we've got some serious issues there. And then we've actually got some serious issues around the quality of house building as well. This is Paul Persimmon, who got picked on, as you can see, in August 2019. It's not just them, it's plenty of others, but there was a particular focus and a report done on the quality of their house building. And actually, anybody who's bought a new house, we talk about snagging. Snagging is tolerated in construction, whereas it would not be in other manufacturing industries. They do not allow the basically lack of final quality before you give the house to the purchaser that other industries do. So there's a real focus here and need to improve that. And then the final problem, which isn't a housing problem, but is a problem for getting new entrants into the industry, is construction has this image of being a wet trade, not particularly great environment to work in. And actually in schools in the UK in particular, if you think of construction, it's either going to be architecture or go and work in construction. That tends to be focused on white males, relatively not academically focused because they're more tactile and use their hands, and it's not seen as a very positive profession to go in. So we need to change all of those things. So no small job. So what we're trying to do is get greener, healthier and fairer homes, and do that through these things, through design challenges with young people, through education pathway, and through working with industry. So I'll cover each of those quite briefly as an intro. So in terms of the education, I think there's three elements to modern construction, which anybody entering the construction profession or built environment professions should have now. And actually people who are working in it should increasingly become familiar with and confident in. So one is digital, obviously, increased use of digital in terms of design, but in terms of management of buildings, in terms of digital twins, in the way you construct buildings. And this is where modern methods, I think, particularly comes in, because of the manufactured environment of modern methods of construction. What is built should bear a almost 100% resemblance to what is on the plans and what's in the digital designs. That is not the same with traditional construction. So MMC is a real way of unlocking digital and creating that that parallel and that ability to rely on digital drawings and run buildings using digital information and building information systems. Second one is sustainability. This is the sort of UN sustainability goals, but a particular focus on zero carbon, on climate adaptation that we've seen with extreme temperatures we've had, flooding, some of those other issues. So how are we dealing with it, both in terms of reducing the embodied carbon in buildings, reducing the carbon that we need to run them, and adapting to the inevitable impacts of climate change that we've already set in place. And then finally, it's how does modern methods, be that off-site, volumetric, panelized components, whatever aspect of volume MMC, how can that help us improve our house building and increase the quality and quantity? So a couple of management consultants, McKinsey and Savills, reckon that by the end of this decade, around about 20% of UK housing will probably be delivered through modern methods. It's around about 9% now. So that's going to help in that growth in housing, and UK government is very interested in that because of that reason alone, that it can increase the amount of housing supply in the United Kingdom and help it reach that 300,000 homes target. So what's Moby doing? Rather than talking about it, we've tried to bring some of that education in. So we've got schools engagement. I'll come back to that in terms of our design challenges and some work we're doing with primaries. We're working with Pearson, the education company, around, we've created some modules for their BTEC and construction and built environment to add more modern elements and housing elements to it. We've just agreed, from September 2023, there'll be a certificate, higher national certificate in modern methods of construction available through Pearson. So people who want to specialise in this area can specialise. And we've got bachelor's, master's, and indeed a PhD programme as well, all looking at different aspects of housing design from an interdisciplinary type approach and trying to shake up the way we do things. So that's part of what we've done. And it's focusing on these things, the things I've talked about: digital skills, manufacturing approaches and technology, different methods and materials, sustainability and low carbon, and retrofit. So those are the sort of areas that we're majoring in on now and think should be part of any modern construction learning. So with Pearson and the BTEC, we created 4 new modules, which are optional units. They can be taken in the second year of that study, and they're around housing design, off-site and on-site, as you can see, alternative construction, renewable energy for housing, and the housing industry in general, because it's such a large part of construction in the UK at the moment and will be into the future as well. And that, we think, is giving young learners the opportunity to focus on these new areas which are going to be of growing importance as they work. They may never in their working life work on an MMC site, although I suspect they probably will, but they'll definitely work on sites which have got MMC going on, definitely. So they really need to know how this is different and what's different about it. We've done work in terms of training the trainers. So it's all very well providing education for youngsters, but you need to help the trainers for them as well. So Offsite Ready, which is available, www.offsiteready.com, is material for trainers free of charge, funded by the CITB around offsite construction. So learners in colleges and universities can access this material. It's got PowerPoints, it's got all sorts of things which will help them teach it. So we enable people who may not know too much about this area to be able to deliver training in offsite. And I think the other thing we then need to do is facilitate industry learners to come in and deliver that. So as well as being Chief Executive of MOBI, I'm also a Director of the Offsite Alliance, an umbrella body for the offsite and MMC industry in the UK, and I particularly lead on the skills side. So one of the things we're trying to do is broker that link between education and learners and industry to bring in industry knowledge, up-to-date knowledge, to teach people what's happening and what the changes are in industry. I think that's really important going into the future. This one we're really excited about. So actually, if we're going to get them into our industry, we've got to grab them young. So we've worked with Twinkle, who are a major resource provider to primary sector in the UK and indeed abroad, across the world. And we've created Building Your Future, Building Our Future program with them, which is a series of exercises for primary school children from nursery right up to the final year of primary school, based around sustainability and home. So getting to think about home and think about sustainability. And what's really nice is you can see Ella here. She's one of the previous winners of our Young Design Challenges, and I'll come on to that in a second. And we've used them to be our experts to tell these young children what it is about the profession, which is great, what it is exciting about working in the built environment. It should be attractive because you can really impact on climate change. 40% of emissions in the UK come from the built environment. So if you want to influence climate change, you can have a real impact. We've seen how homes did and didn't work in lockdown in the UK. So if you want to improve lives of people, create homes that are good and with good green space, etc., these are all exciting things for youngsters to do. So we think it should be a career of aspiration, not as it's currently seen as potentially last resort. And it so happens that all the three presenters we used were all female and all young, and therefore breaking that image of what construction might look like, which tends to be male dominated and somewhat older. Offsite Alliance and MOBI are working on some introductory materials now. So we've got an introduction to offsite webinar that we provide free to colleges and college lecturers, so we can help them understand what's available and what offsite is all about. And we're doing just developing now a offsite made simple program for people like housing associations, contractors, so that they can get a general understanding of what the offsite industry is all about, how it works, what's different, etc. So that's a program we'll be launching in sort of the beginning of next year, most likely. The design challenges are our means of getting to young people. It's quite hard to get this into the curriculum. So what we're focusing on is can we get people through extracurricular activity? And the great news is that you can. And this is what I call my reasons to be cheerful slide. So we were talking a little bit before we began around the sort of issues in the UK. We need 270,000 extra people in the construction industry to offset both the age demographics of people retiring and the fact that we need to build more homes and infrastructure. But we need to dip in a different pool to the one we've got, because we're not going to get people from there. So these are the winners of the first MOBI challenge before I joined as Chief Executive. All girls school from a fairly deprived part of Nottingham. As you can see, multi-ethnic in terms of their composition, everything that the industry says it needs in terms of getting new people into the workforce. Well, the answer is they are there and they're interested. We've just got to make it easy for them to get into the profession and remove some of the barriers. So showing them that it's an exciting industry to work in, an industry they can make a change and make a difference is part of what we do. And they can come up with some amazing designs. The thing about this younger generation is, you'll see from some of these primary examples, there's the one at the bottom is actually a secondary one, but the rest are primary, is they have incredible digital design capability. Some of this design, the one top right, is really sophisticated, and they're doing this on Minecraft in their gaming and not even thinking about it as being, being actual design, but they're doing quite sophisticated and modernistic home design here. And we've had similar examples. So young kids get the built environment, they're quite excited by it, and we've just got to show them that it's a great industry to work in and give them the skills they need for the future. Here's another example. This is more, we did at university level, universities around the UK, and including some university students in Ireland as well, done all throughout lockdown, teams working in isolation, but produced some amazing stuff. And this was multidisciplinary. So the other thing we're quite passionate about is it's not about individual disciplines. I'm a planner by profession, but we need to work with loads of others. So we have planners, architects, quantity surveyors, landscape architects, crucially, and you'll see this in the designs, green elements were in from the beginning, engineers all working together on a site in Sunderland to create a new neighbourhood. And some amazing designs came through this, but they all enjoyed multidisciplinary working. And we know that when you leave college, that's the thing you'll be doing. When you go into practice, you're working in multidisciplinary environments. Another example, London Challenge we've just done, again, some amazing design coming out from the young Londoners. And again, capturing, the whole point about this exercise was to capture people who are representative of the population of London. So actually getting a much more varied and diverse workforce within the built environment in London. And then finally, and I will then pass on back to Alan, industry partnering. So one of the examples, and this is on the research side, is we've worked with Sunderland City Council and Sunderland College. We put in a joint bid to government for levelling up funds, as they describe it, and we are creating this new Housing Innovation and Construction Skills Academy, where we bring together a lot of the house building that is going on in Sunderland as part of regeneration. Their aspiration that a lot of that is modern methods construction, bringing in a modern methods construction manufacturing facility into the city, which has a rich history of manufacturing in any case, shipbuilding, glass making, Nissan car manufacturer, etc., and bringing all of that together in a learning environment where actually we're teaching a new generation lots of new skills, showing them on site and giving them direct employment in the locality. And I think this is a model that can be repeated elsewhere. That's what we're trying to show, that this could be replicated in any major city in the country. Maybe apart from not everybody's going to get a manufacturing centre, but actually that ability to use development and train people using existing resources and existing skills is really important. So I think that's it from me. Yeah, if you want to contact us, there you go. I'll hand over to Alan and we'll have time for questions later, I think.
Thanks, Mark. I just might ask one question before we move on to our second speaker. You mentioned about, the vision of Moby being greener, healthier, and fairer homes. What do you mean by fairer homes?
So I think by fairer homes, we mean one of the acute issues in the UK is the inability of younger generations, and by younger, I mean 35 and down, to buy a home. They are increasingly unaffordable. That's through lack of supply, lack of building. So that's a planning issue, but also fairer in terms of sort of equal access to facilities. So I talked about lockdown. I think we are really sensitized as a result of the lockdown in the UK around how good or not our homes are and our local environments. Those people who had decent air, access to green space, decent space to live in, had a much better lockdown experience than those people who are in small environments, nearest green space miles away, couldn't get to in the time they were allowed to go and walk, etc. And actually that fairness of good places to live and good quality housing and a fair, affordable housing, be that subsidised or just a lower market price. That's what we mean by fairer housing, I think.
Yeah, well, thank you. It's a fascinating initiative instigated by George there. And I suppose as an educator, I might come back to you later on about the various strands of the education programs you're developing, who delivers these, and who validates them, who accredits these programs, and so on. So I might come back to you on that. So thank you so much. A lot of food for thought. There are a lot of initiatives here in Ireland also. And I know that Class of Your Own have been working with the Construction Industry Federation in recent years on a national schools sort of program and competition. So we are aware of the work of the Class of Your Own, and we're delighted to be that you've spoken to us this afternoon. So I'm going to hand you over now to Claire, and Claire is working with the LMC group. I believe it's LMC is a complete asset lifecycle project or company that has facility management, and also you have a MEP division. Is that correct there?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
And an LMC modular solution as well. So I'm going to hand you over to Claire now, who's going to talk about how we can educate the client in respect to off-site manufacturing.
Thanks, Alan.
Thank you.
And thanks to Sisha and Suzanne as well for inviting me to talk here today. So I'm going to be talking about the client mindset change that's required when considering modern methods of construction and offsite manufacturing, and just giving a high-level view of what knowledge the client needs for effective decision-making around using offsite manufacturing in their projects. I'll start with just a bit of background about the LMC Group for anyone who isn't familiar with us and what spaces we operate within built environment. I suppose I should start with introducing myself. I'm Claire Lane and I'm Associate Director and Design Lead with LMC Modular Group. I currently work primarily in the research and design aspects of our modular division. I started with LMC in 2013 in the MEP division, and initially I was focused on services coordination. And then I progressed to driving the digital transition to BIM Level 2 standard for both our MEP and modular divisions. And then just over 2 years ago, I took up the design lead role with our modular division, focusing on the development of a modular building system, digital integration within our modular division, and design for manufacture. So then I suppose a little bit about the group. LMC was initially established in 2008 as a modular building service, or as a building services install company. Notwithstanding being founded in the middle of a recession, it didn't take long for the company to grow and establish a reputation for project delivery. In the majority of the projects, we were maintaining the assets for a period of 1 year after practical completion. And we saw an opportunity to extend this facilities management beyond the defects liability period. And so LMC FM was established in 2014. We were very fortunate that one of our first contracts was with the OPW for the facilities maintenance of the prisons. And this got LMC FM off to a great start, and it's gone from strength to strength since. Just 3 years later, an opportunity presented itself to expand the company group further. A project which we were already contracted in for the mechanical services install had an issue with their pod supplier, and it was likely to delay the overall project. LMC recognised the opportunity this presented for them, and we put our hands up and said, give us a try at it. We had been connecting to pods on sites for years, and we were well aware of what was required. The services were often an area where pods would fall down, and that's where our strengths lied. We had the trades from our FM side, so we developed a prototype, and the developer came to see it and asked how many could we produce a week, and the rest, as they say, is history. And testament to the quality of our pods and our modular side, we're still providing pods to that same main contractor today. LMC Modular allowed us to develop the skills, expertise, and experience in offsite manufacturing. And we're now scaling up for our modular building system. Another branch of the LMC Modular Group is FHS. This is an entity within the LMC Modular Group responsible for design and development of our bespoke modular building system. And this is the area which I primarily work in at the moment. Our 3D volumetric modular building system allows us to look at the whole building performance. We consider the design from the inside out, looking at how services and fabric can work in synergy to achieve an energy and cost efficient building. The topic for today's presentation, I suppose, is born out of the barriers we see with the widespread use of modern methods of construction and particularly offsite manufacturing in the home building industry in Ireland. One of the main barriers is the client's lack of understanding of how the traditional contract model and particularly design process needs to change to facilitate the adoption of modern methods of construction. And I suppose I primarily focus on offsite manufacturing because that's the area that I work in. I suppose I will briefly just run through the drivers that will lead clients to explore modern methods of construction and what factors make this sector ready for this disruption. So one of the first prerequisites to determining if the housing market needs, I suppose, offsite manufacturing. There's a lot of talk in the media around modern methods of construction and that it is poised to gain market share in the housing sector. But what are the demand drivers for this? Why can't traditional construction meet the housing demand? Well, firstly, if we consider the labour dynamic, we have a talent gap emerging in traditional skills, and this will likely be a major driver in the housing sector transitioning to increase the dependency on offsite manufacturing. Modern methods of construction also offers new tech-enabled career opportunities in areas such as digital design, digital integrated manufacturing, automation, production planning. We can pull talent from areas that wouldn't traditionally be considered for the construction industry. So coupled with the declining traditional skills workforce, we also have a deepening housing crisis in the country. there is a governmental housing strategy now in Housing for All that sets defined targets for the housing delivery, and these cannot be met by traditional construction alone. At the end of the day, money talks, and that will always be the biggest driver for the client. Modular offsite manufacturing has been shown to reduce construction programs by up to 50%, and this in turn leads to reduced costs. In the right environment and with the correct trade-offs, reductions of up to 20% have been reported in the overall costs. And then I suppose if we take a look at the market readiness, I expect many of you on the call will already be aware of the McKinsey report from 2020 on the next new normal in construction and familiar with the image that you see here on the right hand side. In that report, McKinsey defines the factors that determine a market readiness to accept modular and offsite manufacturing at a larger scale. Here on the right of the diagram, you can see that it indicates what determines market readiness. On the supply side, we have the access to materials and supply chain, and opposite we have the quality perception, which is a big factor in terms of modular. Many clients still have the perception of modular as those cold and often damp temporary prefab classrooms that many of us would have been in at school. Or perceive modular construction that everything will look very boxy, like it's made of Lego, and they don't realise just what offsite manufacturing can achieve and the quality levels that can be achieved with it. These perceptions are slowly being shifted as clients start to see firsthand the quality and finish that modular buildings can achieve nowadays. On the key drivers is the labour dynamic, which I already touched on. But the construction education sectors need to proactively create the workforce by upskilling existing workforce and ensuring new graduates have the skills needed for adoption of modern methods of construction. Liz, who's speaking next, is that proactive force I think that we need in Ireland on this. The key demand driver is a consolidated and continuous pipeline, and it is key to educate the client on this. The key difference is that manufacturing is a continuous flow, whereas sites are traditionally project-based with ebbs and flows in production and a transient workforce that moves from site to site. An off-site manufacturing factory needs a continuous feed of work, and ideally at high volumes of repetition. Clients need to be aware of this, and they need to design for it in their projects. At the top of the chart is regulation. The technical guidance documents here in Ireland were not written with modern methods of construction in mind, but system certification such as NSAI agreement certification gives the client peace of mind that the system has undergone rigorous analysis and testing in compliance with the building regulations. So I mentioned in the last slide about how the housing crisis is the key driver. So in terms of educating the client on the need to adopt off-site manufacturing and a design for manufacturing approach, it's important that the extent of this crisis is understood. Prior to COVID-19, the housing challenge facing the country was already significant. And unfortunately, with the construction industry closures that we had here in Ireland, coupled with the rising cost of materials, the problem has just been magnified. The provision of affordable housing is a huge contributing factor. In almost half of the counties in Ireland, your average first-time buyer couple cannot afford what is considered an affordable home. The rise in construction costs due to the recent surge in material costs, coupled with stricter mortgage rules, mean that the mortgage that they can secure with their income is no longer enough to get them onto the property ladder. And that coupled with the supply is a big issue. In 2016, less than 10,000 new homes were delivered. The yearly completions rose to over 21,000 in 2019. But unfortunately, COVID-19 disrupted this upward curve, with the supply stable at 21,000 in 2020 and dropping to just over 20,000 in 2021, which is a shortfall of 13,000 on the target home completions per annum. So I suppose last year, the government issued Housing for All, which is their action plan to tackle the housing crisis in Ireland. I think we're all familiar at this stage with the targets it set out, so I won't run through those again. The construction industry as it is now, though, cannot reach these targets, and therefore the plan places off-site manufacturing as a key deliverable for modular housing solutions. The public sector is set to provide exemplar projects, and this will really help build much needed confidence and capacity in the off-site manufacturing sector. But again, the public sector needs to realise that need for a continuous pipeline, because off-site manufacturers need to feed those factories with a continuous pipeline. You can't have gaps in production like you can with a project-based environment. It is expected that over the duration of the Housing for All plan, the 3D volumetric market will grow to providing approximately 5,000 units annually, which is about 15% of the required houses. And although modular or offsite manufacturing is not the solution to the housing crisis on its own, it can significantly contribute to the supply of all the houses that we do need. So I suppose another thing that the client needs to understand is the advantages of using offsite manufacturing, and the advantages particularly that it can bring to the housing supply. A key piece of education that we need to, I suppose, get across to the client is all the benefits that it can offer and how they can leverage these benefits for their, I suppose, for their own improvements. Under quality, we'd have quality assurance and factory production control in all the modular factories. This will reduce any, I suppose, defects, snagging or variations. Defects are identified in the factory and remedied in the factory. This reduces a lot of snagging on site, and it reduces the need to mobilise the various trades, tools and materials to site. In terms of speed of delivery, site works can run in tandem with the model or module manufacturing in the factory. This condenses the overall programme, and it can reduce completion times by up to 50%. The increased speed to market then can lead to increased revenue potential. And at the end of the day, money is always a key driver for the client. In terms of the reduced carbon footprint, this is increasingly and rightfully so becoming a driving factor. In modular or offsite manufacturing, you have reduced handling of materials. You have reduced deliveries, as you're not delivering to many building sites, but to a central production facility. Design for manufacturing automation, or DFMA as it's called, and computer-aided manufacture means material waste is vastly reduced. I know in our own factory, we really analyse, I suppose, the nesting of all our board cutting to ensure that we're reusing offcuts elsewhere if possible, and just reducing our waste as much as possible. The shorter construction programme as well will also mean less energy waste and lower levels of on-site pollution. And better quality assurance in production will also mean that you'll expect better thermal performance in the overall buildings that are manufactured off-site. And then programme certainty. Early design freeze means that it reduces the possibility of on-site delays. A lot of on-site delays are caused by design, I suppose, uncertainties going to site, or design changes after it has gone to site. And these have knock-on effects, whereas with off-site manufacturing, your decisions are made early and the modules are already manufactured, so there isn't any room for changes. Another aspect on programme certainty is that the factory production isn't affected by adverse weather conditions. You also have reductions in the labour input, both in and off-site, when you're using an off-site manufacturing element in your build. Off-site is not as affected by the skill shortage as on-site is. Processes can be adapted in the factory where there is a skill shortage. And automation and robotics will further reduce reliance on labour, I suppose, as we become more sophisticated in the industry. And then on site optimization, I suppose offsite manufacturing and modular construction can be very efficient for your on-site build, and this can be very helpful in restricted sites such as city centre sites. And there's also a lot of flexibility in design in modular, which is often overlooked. I suppose then, if you think about the target markets, and offsite isn't just suited to the housing sector, it's suited to many other sectors, which will help relieve the pressure on the overall construction industry. It's an extremely attractive, I suppose, venture from a risk management perspective because of its flexibility. Repetition and a continuous pipeline for the factory are key, though, to realising the efficiencies that can be achieved from offsite manufacturing. And it's one of the reasons that it's particularly suited to the housing sector. With clever design, repetition can be achieved across many sites as opposed to just on one development. Although developments may look similar from the outside, repetition can be built into the internal layouts with many repeating elements, and you can alter the, I suppose, the aesthetic to suit the particular area that the housing is going into, but we're keeping I suppose, repetition in the footprint. So I suppose then just a quick overview of the methods of modern construction, because I tend to focus a lot on offsite manufacturing because that's the, I suppose, the area that we're working in. But there are a lot of other categories as well. I won't run through them all here, but just to give you brief overview, I suppose there are the pre-manufactured led approaches, so these would be your offsite, but also in modern methods of construction, you have site-led approaches. So say, for instance, category 1 there are your 3D volumetric modules. This is where our modular building system lies. 2D are your panelized offsite systems. 3D or category 3 includes things such as pre-manufactured staircases, precast floors, prefabricated roof trusses. Category 4 is additive manufacturing. So this would be things like 3D printing of concrete. And then category 5, they're non-structural sub-assemblies. So again, we work in this area with our pod factory. And then 6 are things like brick panels, things that reduce skills required on site. And then 7 would be, I suppose, site labor and productivity improvements. These could be things like exoskeletons that allow laborers to carry more material. It reduces the amount of injuries, reduces the amount of trips they have to make. So yeah, I suppose, look, there are a lot of different categories, and the client needs to know how to procure a design team with the skill set and experience to design and advise on what categories of modern methods of construction may suit their design. The design team members need to upskill on modern methods of construction themselves and what's available in the Irish context, and be able to advise the client when offsite is preferable, what types of modern methods of construction may suit their development, and any parameters and limitations of such systems. The client needs to ask the design team to undertake these investigations, and they need to request the analysis at early design concept stage. And unless they are aware of the need or potential advantage, they won't push this. Not all developments will lend themselves to full offsite manufacturing, but elements such as like sub-assemblies, such as bathrooms or M&E risers, might be able to be manufactured offsite and may suit developments that are, I suppose, don't have repetitive elements in the floor plan layouts. So now just a quick look at I suppose, the challenges facing offsite manufacturing. So I've mentioned already the cultural change or the mindset. This is going to take time, and it's going to take a lot of exemplary examples in the Irish context before it is fully accepted as being a norm in the house building sector. Supply chain is also another challenge. There's benefits, obviously, of the supply of using the materials, repetitive materials, but there's also risks because you have fewer suppliers. You don't have backup suppliers, I suppose, and also if you're tied into certain materials because of, let's say, for instance, fire testing, you don't have the option of picking an alternative supplier. You're tied to a certain supplier. So the early design freeze, although that has a lot of advantages in terms of the program, it's also, you know, can be a complicated approval process. It's, you know, you need a lot more resources up front, a lot more time up front in the design than you do in a traditional contract. And there needs to be a realization of that, I suppose, from the client's point of view, and they need to understand the different contract model that is required. I'll go through that in a bit more detail in a while. And again, similarly on the financial model, I'll touch on that in a later slide, but it is a different financial model when you're thinking modular offsite manufacturing than it is your traditional model. Continuous pipeline is one of the biggest challenges that we see, that you need to have a continuous pipeline going through the factory. And I think clients need to understand the rationale behind that and why it's required. Precise planning and scheduling, again, it's a very, the on-site scheduling needs to be aligned to the off-site manufacturing scheduling to make sure that when the modules arrive to site, that the site is ready for the modules, and vice versa, that once the site is ready for the modules, that they start arriving to site. Design restrictions, although there is a lot of flexibility in modular design and off-site manufacturing, there will be some restrictions on the design. For example, the size of modules for transportation. If you go over a certain design parameters, you're looking at permits and Garda escorts, and you may have further, I suppose, restrictions on the route you're going. If there's low bridges or anything, it may actually dictate part of your design. Oh, so sorry, I've kind of touched on the logistical complications there as well on that one. So I mentioned there about designing for manufacturing and I suppose the change of mindset that's required for that. Offsite manufacturing is often viewed as bringing construction into the factory, whereas it needs to be viewed as manufacturing in a factory environment for the construction industry. We need to design for manufacturing the factory rather than manufacturing what has been designed for construction on a building site. Early design decisions are critical. The client needs to understand the rationale and the benefits of this. Traditional design changes at procurement or construction stage will not be effective as modules will already be in production. So the client and the design team need to understand that decisions need to be made earlier in the process and that these decisions need to be finalized decisions. But there is advantages to this. It mitigates the risk of delays caused by late design changes that you see in traditional contracts. Similarly, any value engineering needs to happen at an earlier stage in the design. You need to have experienced designers, experienced project managers to ensure the success of this. Every detail needs to be considered and its cost implications. Small design changes can make a big difference when you think that the change is affected over multiples of hundreds of modules. Design for manufacture is critical to achieve production efficiencies, but also to ensure adequate quality assurance and quality control is built into the system design, and that you've considered all the safety of your work practices in the factory and in assembly on site, and that you've designed for these accordingly. Detailed design through BIM facilities and computer-aided manufacture is key as well to ensuring the accuracy is carried through from the BIM model right through to your production. I know in our own company, we design in a BIM model, and then our linkage seal and our boarding cutting is generated directly from that BIM model and communicated to the factory floor, so that you're taking out the risk of error there, or the risk of human error in inputting the information, because it's transferred directly from the BIM model, and that also leads to higher accuracies. We're also able to generate accurate BOMs from our BIM model, so bills of material, and this reduces construction waste and it also reduces the risk of over ordering. So then I suppose I've talked there a bit about I suppose why it's important for the client to be aware of, I suppose, the advantages and the risks involved in choosing modular over traditional construction or vice versa. So this slide just shows some of the areas where modular or offsite has inherent higher risk, but there are also many areas where it reduces the risk in comparison to traditional build. I won't run through all of these, but just to give some examples. For example, the water intrusion and its effects on quality are much higher in an open construction site, whereas offsite manufacturing, it's occurring in a dry roofed environment. We were recently doing a prototype for a project in our factory, and we got a roofer to come in to roof the module in the factory, and he commented that was the first time he'd ever roofed a roof already in a roofed building. So it has its advantages. The factory as well, it doesn't need to stop production due to adverse weather conditions, whereas a site would be more susceptible to the weather. Off-site is less affected by the skilled labour shortage than on-site. I mentioned before that you can pivot to suit the skills that you do have. Modular construction is more susceptible to material delays, though, as often materials are system specific and cannot be replaced with similar materials due to fire testing. You know, that you have tested with a particular material in the fire test, so you can't replace that with another material and still guarantee the same performance. It's important that the client and its design team factor in a risk analysis in their decision making at the early design stages when investigating which construction method they're going to go with, be it a traditional method or one of the various modern methods of construction. So I did talk about the contract models for contract model, and it's, I suppose, the difference in it for an offsite modular build versus a traditional build. So you need to, I suppose, think about the differences in it, and the client needs to realise that there is a big shift in how the contract is applied when it is an offsite manufacturing project. Like the client would initially engage with their project or cost manager to assess if the project, if the proposed project lends itself to offsite manufacturing. If it is decided offsite manufacturing is the most suitable route, an appropriate design team and offsite manufacturer should be engaged to ensure that the offset manufacturer is involved in the early design. Concept designs are developed within the construction method that you've chosen and within the design parameters of the system that you've chosen to build within. The project team, in conjunction with the main contractor, become the project delivery team, and early engagement of the offset manufacturer is key to the success of this. Offset manufacturing, it really is different because you are front loading the design side of it. You're making all your design decisions earlier in the contract, and that's really important for the client to understand that, and to understand that the design, I suppose the design side of the contract is consolidated, because you're not making decisions throughout the project, you're making decisions earlier on in the design, in the whole process. So I suppose this chart probably shows that a bit clearer. So you have this, the red line here is indicating your modular, I suppose, your modular cash flow and decision making, and then this line indicates your traditional. So for instance, if we look at on your modular, you will be making design decisions much earlier on, whereas on the traditional construction, design decisions are still being made out here, and the finishing date is dependent on those design decisions and the delays that those design decisions cause. Whereas because of the earlier design decision with modular, you end up with a much steeper construction and a much steeper construction curve, and you get finished much earlier. I'm very conscious of the time, so I better finish up and hand back over to you, Alan. Sorry about that.
No, that's very good. And what's really shining out for me, thanks very much, Claire, is this need for strategic investment in training.
Yes, that's very important. Yeah, and it's right through all aspects. So I suppose a lot of people think about upskilling the existing workforce, and they think about, sorry, I should have my camera on, upskilling the existing workforce, and they think about upskilling our new graduates. But a lot of people don't think about the client side of it, and that you need to bring the client along with you on this journey. The client needs to understand everything that's relevant to their decision making when it comes to offsite manufacturing and modern methods of construction.
There's probably a need for a community of practice to come together. I know there are some plans around that in Ireland. And just before we come on to our last speaker, Liz, who'll be talking about the skills that are needed for this new way of thinking, is, you said a number of times that, you need pipeline.
Yeah.
And of course, there's been a lot of failed dreams in this industry, internationally in the world of MMC. And I'm just wondering, are MMC companies, perhaps, maybe those that haven't survived, were they perhaps inflexible and not adaptable enough to a changing changing sector? We're not a manufacturing industry.
So there has to be flexibility. You can't say, this is the product I make and you have to procure this exact product.
So the idea that you're going to be flat out 24 hours a day with 3 shifts building these homes is not really viable. Do you know what I mean? So I'm just thinking, will the companies that survive in MMC, and I'm talking about, volumetric, high volume, modular construction, as opposed to the more hybrid versions. For example, I know the MEP companies are very successful in componentizing electrical and mechanical solutions and so on. So listen, that was really excellent. Thank you very much. Definitely a few questions to come back to you about. And so our last speaker, not least speaker, is Liz from the Construction Professional Skill Net. So Liz, over to you. You're going to talk about responding to the training needs of MMC. Thank you. You're on mute there. Yeah.
Apologies.
No problem.
Sorry for that.
Yeah.
And now I just have to get my own PowerPoint up for myself. Apologies.
It's okay.
Bear with me. Sorry. You can't see my screen. Just bear with me for a second. I'm going to start all over again there now.
That's okay. That's okay. That's okay. Mm-hmm.
I had it set up and now I'm after it up. Okay, share the screen. Okay, can you all see that now then?
No, we can't see that at the moment. So there's a
it's
little.
just open down in your. Oh yeah, here it's come.
There you go now.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah,
We're good to go.
Okay, perfect. Sorry about that.
Panic over.
Hi, my name is Liz. I'm delighted to be here. I'm the manager of the Construction Professionals SkillNet. And I suppose really what I'm here to talk to you today about is the response to the skills needs for modern methods of construction. So I'll just give you a little bit about the history and how we got involved, a bit around research that we carried out and the results that we found. Luckily, at the same time as those results came out, there was a funding opportunity. So what we have done with that, where we are with it, and where we are going with it, I suppose, is really what we're looking at talking about. So a little bit around the background. The Construction Professional SkillNet came into existence in February 2020. And very early on, I was hearing a lot around modern methods of construction and what it was doing. And it struck me that it was very similar to an area that I've been involved in years ago, which is supply chain management. And I was looking to see, what the skill requirements were for the area, because I was fairly sure that they would be quite aligned to what was used in manufacturing in the past. So I went to the expert group in future skill needs to see what they were doing, and they were looking at, they were at the time doing research into the skill needs in the construction sector, but they had actually specifically left out modern methods of construction because they felt it was more aligned to manufacturing. There was also a report by the Construction Industry Federation in collaboration with the construction sector group on MMC as well, and they weren't looking at the skills either. So we responded to a call from SkillNet Ireland for funding for research into modern methods of construction and the skills that were related to that. So I think it was around July 2021, actually, it was before we got that funding, Quality Positive were chosen to carry out the research. And basically what they were looking at, the objectives of that research were to, first of all, carry out a value chain analysis of the current construction business model, propose a future construction value chain map for modern methods of construction, summarise how MMC is impacting the Irish and international construction sectors, determine the implications of MMC on the roles and the skills required to perform effectively in the sector, and then to propose recommendations to both the employers and the people designing training around the skills and how to address those skills were part of the objectives of that research. So some of the results then, the 5 key areas that came out as being the areas that were essential, I suppose, to being effective in modern methods of construction were these that I have up here now. So primarily the number one was having a good understanding of MMC, but also along with that around construction materials knowledge as well. Secondly, then collaboration skills. And that to me really just spoke highly of supply chain management, and just the whole mindset around supply chain management really came out prominently for me in that. Quality assurance and control, as Claire was talking about, that it's under factory production, so there's high quality assurance, much easier to manage, and being able to deliver to specific standards. Then also, as you could see from what Claire was talking about, the requirements around planning and scheduling, and it being a lot more, I suppose, tighter, and not so flexible, let's say, as it might be, that you have a design freeze up front. And this also impacts the collaboration that's required because everybody needs to be involved up front. And then the additional logistics that are required around that as well. And then the underpinning of digitization of the sector. So the likes of BIM, data analysis, data analytics, can't speak, being involved, and also some regulatory knowledge. So this is what we ended up with. The report came out in April 2022, which was quite significant in the end, because in April 2022. So at that time then, there was a new funding call. There was a Brexit adjustment reserve that SkillNet Ireland offered. And in that, part of what we had submitted for that was around developing solutions for the sector in modern methods of construction. So if we go back to the previous slide, as I had said, one that I was familiar with would have been around the collaboration skills. And I also had felt that I needed to understand a little bit more about what was required in the number one, which was around MMC understanding and also construction materials knowledge. So we put in the funding without really knowing a huge amount for a micro-credential at level 8 in strategic coordination and collaboration, and also for varied CPD for MMC. And in this, for the pilot that's produced, it's only SMEs, but once the pilot is done, we can offer it in our main programme to all companies. So how did we get then? We actually we were awarded the funding in June this year. So then it was kind of all hands on deck. So first thing was to put out an RFT, a request for tender, for the micro-credential programme. And then kind of at the same time, we started working with the MMC working group that had been working on the previous reports with CIF. And we had a couple of facilitated sessions with the working group. Claire was part of that group. And really what we did was we did a brainstorm on what, well, we've only begun. There's a number, we've done 3 sessions so far, and we're only, I suppose, tapping at the edges really. So we started off with the understanding of MMC, who needed to understand it and what they actually needed to know or be able to do with that understanding, let's say. So we ended up with a mile-long whiteboard with post-its all over it. So looking at that then, that took us a whole 3-hour session to really get down quite a lot of needs. And even with that, we decided certain elements needed to be cordoned off and put elsewhere, and we would look at those again. We then moved in a similar vein to look at what the needs for coordination and collaboration were. And out of that, then we developed the learning outcomes for the micro-credential that is currently now being submitted to Griffith College, who were the winners of the RFT. They had taken over from the Irish Institute of Purchasing Materials Management. They took over their programs. And so obviously collaboration being very much supply chain focused, it fits in very much with what they offer. So we currently have learning outcomes devised and developed for that. And so there are 3 areas we're looking at in general. So the 3 areas are project management, commercial relationships, and then creating a collaborative culture. So they're the 3 kind of key areas, and each of those have learning outcomes under those. Our next phase is, once the actual document is approved by Griffith College internally, that then goes to QQI to be approved. Now, they would normally have a meeting in October, but that's not going to happen. So we're hoping to be approved in the December meeting. But as soon as Griffith College have it approved, our next stage then is to go back to the working group and to start working on the actual content of the programme in collaboration with Griffith College for this. So that'll mean breaking down each of those learning outcomes into actual deliverables for the programme. On top of that, then we'll also go back to the working group. They have a lot of work to do, but I've been told they've been very, very generous with the time. But as they were saying, that it's easier for them to work together to create what the actual needs are, and it means that they have the support of each other in deciding what's out there. So we're really literally at the beginning of the journey. So the next phase then is to develop some CPD solutions, especially around the area of understanding MMC, and we will continue the work on the different areas that were already identified. So as I'm saying, we're at phase 1, step 1, And I think, as Claire had said to me previously, it's a marathon, not a sprint.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Liz. And Liz, quick question for you. Are there programs available through CP Skelnet for companies to learn more about MMC?
We're just developing them at the moment.
Oh, you're just developing them at the moment.
That's literally where we're at. It's a very new area. There is not really anything out there specific around construction. There are things that people would learn and pick up from other areas, but it doesn't bring in the context of construction contracts, of how traditional construction works.
Yeah, so there's a lot of work to be done there.
There's a lot there to be done.
Yeah, there was a lot of talk this morning or this afternoon about collaboration, and so now that Moby and CP Skillnet and LMC know each other, there could be that collaboration can take place, because I would suspect that the learnings from the Moby initiative, a lot could be used, you know, and I just think there's so much reinvention of the wheel whilst they might have Brexit, we're still collegial, you know, countries, very important trading partner, obviously United Kingdom, and so that kind of cross initiative needs to really, I would encourage that. So I'm not sure if you have any questions from the audience. I know we're a little bit tight on time. I have to go to another Zoom meeting very shortly, but I suppose one question I do have is there was some mention of digitalization. So maybe a quick question for you, Claire. You know, you in your former role in LMC were the BIN champion, the digital transition champion in LMC, or how important is this, the digital strategy, the digital piece to leveraging OSM?
Oh, it's hugely important, and a big aspect of it, and I suppose it's something that we've put a lot of resources into, is the digital integration across all aspects. So we don't just use the BIM model for design, we use it for material takeoff. We also use it to, I suppose, send files directly to the production floor. The BOMs are communicated to our ERP system, so we're using the same coding from our ERP system in our BIM models, and you have to have that level of efficiency and that level of communication across all systems, and like the digitalization is hugely important in that respect. And
yeah,
we've only gone a portion of the way into our journey on that. We have, I suppose, a lot more that we want to integrate, so that we're reducing the risk of human error, reducing the double accounting of information, that you've just got one golden thread of information through the whole system. Yeah,
we've heard a lot about the golden thread in the last number of months, and yeah, it's interesting. I was just reading, I was just saying before we started that I was reading some students' work recently on OMC and OSM, sorry, and there was a recent survey done in the UK of a very large population of home buyers, and 52% of them were not happy about living in modern, modular homes. So not only do we have to educate the client, perhaps we need to educate society that
the end user as well leads to
the end user that there's nothing. These are as good, if not better, homes to live in.
And I think that's something that we see when clients come to our facility and they see we have a showroom there, and they see the level of finish that you actually get at the factory. They're always very surprised by that, because they don't expect it to be a fully finished internally. They expect it to be a bit more like walking into a building site, I suppose, at second fix stage or something. They don't expect that it's fully finished internally.
Yeah. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not sure if you have any questions from the audience. We obviously will be sharing this this video presentation with you all, and there could be an opportunity for you to contact the speakers themselves. So I'm not going to delay much longer. I'm going to bring it to a close, if I may. And I've learned so much. Mark, the Moby initiative is fantastic. The vision of the Ministry of Building, Innovation and Education is really, really, really interesting. particularly, I think what you're doing at the schools, the BTEC, the HNC, HND, all of the PhD, I'm sure that'll be of great interest to CP SkillNet.
Yeah, I
Particularly
definitely
if you have
your hint. I think
modules.
we're going to connect, and actually we're doing work with SMEs and how you get SMEs involved.
Yeah,
in
if you've got
methods as well.
modules and learning outcomes and all that good stuff done, let's have a look at that, and how we can get some, maybe. I know there's a North-South initiative in Call coming up soon in Ireland. This is where the north of Ireland and the southern Ireland work together. You know, there's a housing problem in both jurisdictions. Maybe there's something there. Maybe there's an initiative there that we could work on across the border, and sort of close that, try and address an issue like that. So thank you very much, Mark. Really interesting presentation, you, Claire, as well. Lots of experience with BIM, and the cash flow piece I thought was interesting. I like that curve you did, curve showing all that front loading of the cash flow.
Yeah, when you see it in a chart, it helps to understand
clients
it better.
Don't like to pay for things that are not on site, So there's lots of legal pieces about that, and wishing you all the best as well, Liz, on your CP SkillNet. And if we can help CETA SkillNet could collaborate with you,
Okay.
That's something we very much look forward to. And of course, the whole purpose of SkillNet is to subsidize training, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So so I'm going to bring that to a close and just maybe ask Suzanne just to share some final slides, and to wish you all my very best, and thank you again to all our speakers. So just want to go to the next events. So our next event is going to take place on the 29th of September. This is the Digital Trend Series, and we're looking at quality inspection made easy through digital. And we're going to be hearing actually from one UK speaker about, the safety bill coming into the UK, and this whole issue around it's no longer going to be a nice thing to have, quality product. Is going to be a requirement now that we have that golden thread that Liz spoke about. And also on the 13th of October, we're going to be having our final Digital Housing Series event. And this really is the end product of the year. This is the vision of a new technology centre of excellence. You may be aware, Mark may not be aware, but there's a new Construct Innovate Centre being funded by the Irish government to bring all this together. And the focus of this Construct Innovate Centre will be to focus on housing for the first year. I think there's 1,200 researchers are involved in this initiative. And so there'll be more about that. We have a regional series coming up in November, 15th to the 17th of November. So we want to engage with all our regional colleges, the new universities, regional members. And then we'll be coming back to 2 more tech trend events in 2022. We'll be looking at automation and robotic futures on the 20th of October, and finishing with managing productivity on construction sites on the 17th. So we have 7 more events, Suzanne, this year. Yeah. So I'm going to bring that to a close, Suzanne. You want to say anything, Suzanne? Do you want to say a few words at all?
Just to thank everybody. Thanks so much for your time. It's much appreciated.
Yeah. And we'll see you all hopefully in the 29th of September. We're going to continue with this these webinars. I think they're being very popular. So thank you very much, Suzanne. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Thanks everyone for your time. Much
Liz.
appreciated.
Thanks everybody.
Thanks, Ellen.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.